The rain came down in sheets that night, drumming against the rusty rooftops of Maple Street. Streetlights flickered through the storm like dying candles. Inside a modest one-story home, David and Ruth Collins sat by the fire, sipping tea in silence. They were a middle-class couple who had tried for years to have a child, but fate had never blessed them with one. The wind howled outside, and then a faint knock echoed through the door. David frowned. Who on earth would be out in this weather? Ruth rose slowly. Maybe someone needs help. When she opened the door, lightning flashed, revealing a boy, drenched, trembling, maybe 10 or 11 years old. His clothes were torn, and his eyes, large and hollow, carried a look that only loss could carve. Please, he whispered. I don't have anywhere to go. David hurried over, wrapping a blanket around the boy. What's your name, son? He hesitated. Eli. Ruth glanced at her husband. We can't just send him away. David sighed, looking into the boy's desperate eyes. No, we can't. That night, as thunder rolled across the sky, the Collinses made a decision that would forever change their lives. They let the boy stay. Eli barely spoke at first. He ate quietly, slept soundly, and when he woke the next morning, Ruth noticed how his eyes followed her every move, like a child watching a world he never knew could exist. Days turned to weeks. David taught him to fix things around the house. Ruth made him lunches for school. Slowly, Eli began to smile again. The neighbors often said the Collinses looked happier than ever, that the boy had filled the emptiness in their hearts. But what no one knew was that deep inside Eli, a storm far darker than the one that brought him to their doorstep was quietly brewing. The following months brought laughter back into the Collins home. Eli was changing, not just in size but in spirit. He helped Ruth with groceries, fixed the leaky faucet with David, and began calling them Mom and Dad. Ruth cherished those words like music. She'd often tell David, I feel like God sent him to us. Maybe we were meant to be his parents all along. David would smile, though sometimes when Eli wasn't looking, he'd study the boy's eyes, sharp, calculating, and distant. There was a quietness about Eli that didn't always fit with his innocent smile. At school, Eli excelled. Teachers said he was bright but reserved. Other kids liked him, though some whispered that he had a temper when pushed. One afternoon, the Collinses went to his school for a parent-teacher meeting. His teacher, Mrs. Hall, smiled politely as she spoke. Eli is intelligent, one of the best I've taught, but he struggles with attachment. He doesn't talk much about his past. Ruth reached for David's hand. He'll open up. He just needs time. When they got home, Ruth found Eli sitting on the porch, staring into the distance. Eli, she said softly, your teacher says you're doing great. He didn't turn. Why did you take me in? The question stunned her. Because you needed love, she answered. Eli looked at her then, his face unreadable. People only help when it makes them feel better. That's not love. Ruth's heart sank. She wanted to argue, but his tone carried something old, something broken. David later told her not to worry. He's just processing his past, he said. But late that night, as Eli sat in his room, he stared at an old photo he kept hidden in a drawer, a burned picture of a small house and two faces half turned away. Love, he whispered under his breath, doesn't save anyone. Outside, a storm began to build again, a quiet echo of the one that had brought him there years ago. Years passed. Eli grew taller, stronger, sharper. At 17, he looked like the kind of young man every parent would be proud of, disciplined, polite, with eyes that seemed to see through people. But inside the Collins home, things were no longer the same. Ruth noticed first. He stopped eating dinner with them, stopped joining family prayers, stopped calling them Mom and Dad. When David tried to speak to him, Eli's answers grew short, distant, cold. One evening, Ruth knocked on his door. Eli? Dinner's ready. Pause. I'm not hungry, came the reply. She lingered a moment, then said softly, You've been quiet lately. Is everything okay? The door opened just a little. His eyes met hers, emotionless. I didn't ask to be here, he said flatly. Ruth froze. What do you mean? You wanted a child. You didn't want me. He shut the door. She stood there, trembling, unable to find words. Downstairs, David watched the scene unfold from the living room. He loved Eli, maybe too much, but a growing fear gnawed at him. Something in the boy's voice had changed. Later that week, David found Eli sitting in the garage tinkering with an old radio. You've got talent, David said, trying to connect. Ever think about studying engineering? Eli smirked without looking up. College costs money. David smiled faintly. We'll figure it out. That's when Eli finally turned to him. "You've done enough. I'll take care of myself." There was something final in his tone. That night, as the house went quiet, Ruth whispered in the dark, "I don't know who he's becoming, David." David pulled her close. "He's our son. He'll find his way." But as they drifted to sleep, Eli stood by his bedroom window, staring into the darkness outside. A thin smile crossed his lips, not of joy but of quiet resolve. He whispered to himself, "Love makes you weak, and I'll never be weak again." By the time Eli turned 19, the Collins home no longer felt like home. David and Ruth still loved him, perhaps even more because they sensed him slipping away. But love, when met with silence, begins to ache. Eli had stopped going to church with them. He spent long nights out with people they didn't know. When he returned, there was a strange smell on his clothes: alcohol, smoke, city air. One evening, David sat waiting in the dimly lit living room. The clock ticked past midnight before Eli finally walked in. "You're late," David said, his voice steady. Eli shrugged. "I'm not a kid anymore. You still live under my roof." "Your roof," Eli repeated, his tone sharp. "Right. I almost forgot whose charity I'm living on." David's chest tightened. "That's not what I meant." "But it's true, isn't it?" Eli's eyes glimmered with something colder than anger. "You took me in to feel good about yourselves, to prove you were good people." Ruth, hearing the voices, came down the stairs. "Eli, please don't talk to your father like that." He turned toward her, his expression unreadable. "He's not my father." The words cut through the room like a blade. Ruth gasped softly. David stood, trying to steady his voice. "I may not be your real father, but I've loved you as my own. Everything you've ever had. Everything you gave me," Eli interrupted. "But nothing I ever asked for." He turned away, heading toward his room. David's voice cracked as he called out, "I gave you a home, Eli. I gave you a life." The boy stopped. For a long moment he said nothing. Then, without looking back, "And now it's mine." He disappeared into the hallway, leaving only silence behind. Ruth's eyes filled with tears. She whispered, "We did everything right, David, didn't we?" David couldn't answer. Deep inside, something told him they were losing more than just their son. They were losing the heart of the family itself. And upstairs, behind a closed door, Eli sat on his bed, staring at the shadows dancing across his wall. He whispered to himself, almost like a vow, "You can build a man a home, but you can't make him belong." Outside, the wind howled again, a familiar sound echoing the night he first arrived. It started small, subtle changes that most people would overlook. A few missing bills from the mail. A cracked phone screen David didn't remember breaking. A gold bracelet Ruth couldn't find one morning. They didn't want to believe it was Eli. But sometimes love makes you blind to what's right in front of you. David tried to hold the family together. He still cooked breakfast for all three of them every Sunday, even though Eli rarely came downstairs anymore. Ruth still set an extra plate at the table, a habit she couldn't let go of. Then one evening, a knock came at the door. A police officer stood there, hat in hand. "Mr. Collins," he said, "we found your car parked near the old bridge. The engine was running, but no one was inside." David frowned. "Was it stolen?" The officer hesitated. "There was a young man seen nearby. Fits the description of your son." Ruth's heart sank. Eli. That night, Eli didn't come home. When he finally did, near dawn, he reeked of gasoline and smoke. David confronted him in the kitchen. "Where were you?" Eli didn't answer. He just poured himself a glass of water. "Don't walk away from me." David's voice cracked. Eli turned slowly, his eyes empty. "You want to control everything. Even me. I'm trying to save you, son. Stop calling me that." Eli's voice thundered. "I don't owe you anything." The glass shattered on the floor. For a moment, neither of them moved. Ruth stood frozen at the hallway, tears glistening in her eyes. Then Eli stormed out of the house, the front door slamming behind him. Hours later, the Collinses sat on the couch in silence. Ruth clutched a photo of the three of them, back when smiles came easily. "He's lost, David," she whispered. "But maybe he'll find his way back." David stared at the flickering TV screen, his face pale with quiet fear. "I don't know if he wants to come back." Outside, Eli walked through the empty streets, the world around him blurred by streetlights and anger. He felt betrayed by life, by love, by every hand that tried to help him. In his mind, one thought echoed again and again. They made me. They owe me. And somewhere in that twisted belief, a dark plan began to take shape. 3 weeks passed. The Collins house was quieter than ever, the kind of silence that hums like grief. Ruth tried to keep herself busy with chores and prayers, while David spent most evenings sitting on the porch, staring at the road. They didn't speak of Eli much, but both of them were waiting for the sound of footsteps that never came. Until one evening, it did. Ruth was in the kitchen when she heard the front gate creak open. David stepped outside, heart pounding, and saw him, Eli, standing at the edge of the yard. He looked different, thinner, hardened. His once boyish eyes had become cold mirrors reflecting something unreadable. David's voice trembled. Eli, son? Eli smiled faintly, not kindly but out of habit. Didn't think you'd still be here. This is your home, David said softly. Is it? Eli asked, stepping closer. Or is it just a place where you get to feel like heroes? Ruth rushed out, tears welling. She threw her arms around him, whispering, You're back, thank God you're back. Eli stood stiff in her embrace, his eyes darting past her toward the open door, scanning the living room like a stranger walking into a house he once knew. That night they sat together for the first time in months. Ruth served dinner, roast chicken, Eli's favorite from years ago. But he barely touched it. David tried to start a conversation. You can stay as long as you need. We'll figure things out together. Eli's fork clinked against his plate. I don't need you to figure anything out for me, Eli. You think you're saints, he said, his voice low, but you're just people who took in a broken kid to fix your own emptiness. The words struck like thunder. Ruth's eyes filled with tears again. That's not true, Eli. We loved you. He looked up at her, and for a second, just a second, something in his face softened. But then it vanished, replaced by something colder. Love doesn't feed me. Love doesn't fix anything. He stood up, the chair scraping harshly against the floor, and walked out of the room. Ruth buried her face in her hands, sobbing quietly. David stood frozen, staring at the doorway where Eli had disappeared. The same doorway he'd once walked through as a scared little boy needing warmth. Now he was a stranger bringing shadows back home. And as night fell, Eli sat in the garage again, eyes lost in thought, the hum of silence wrapping around him like an old friend. He whispered to himself, It's time they finally see who I really am. The days after Eli's return felt uneasy, as if the house itself was holding its breath. He would disappear for hours, sometimes the whole night, and come back just before dawn. When Ruth asked where he'd been, he'd say, out. David tried to convince himself that having him home was better than not knowing where he was at all, but deep down he sensed something was unraveling. One gray morning, David found Eli sitting in the garage again. The light fell through the window in narrow stripes, cutting across the dust in the air. On the table lay a pile of old family photos, pictures Ruth had kept in an album for years. David cleared his throat. Those mean a lot to your mother. Eli didn't look up. She likes pretending. Pretending? That this house is full of love. That I fit here. David sat down across from him. You do fit here, son. You always have. Eli's jaw tightened. Stop calling me that. Silence hung between them. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance. David's voice dropped. If you keep running from everyone who tries to care about you, one day you'll find yourself truly alone. Eli finally looked at him, a long, hollow stare. Alone's the only thing I've ever been good at. He stood and walked out, leaving the old photographs scattered like broken glass across the table. That evening, the rain returned, heavy, relentless, a mirror of the storm inside the house. Ruth cooked dinner, trying to fill the silence with the smell of food. She hummed softly, a habit she used whenever she was afraid. Eli appeared at the doorway, soaked from the rain. For a brief moment, she saw not the hardened young man, but the boy who had once stood there, shivering on the night they met. Eli, she said gently, sit down, let's eat together. He hesitated, eyes flicking to the plates, then to her face. Something in him trembled, not anger, not love, but confusion. He sat. They ate quietly. Then, without warning, Eli asked, Why did you keep me? Ruth's fork paused midair. Because you needed us. Or because you needed me? The question hit her like a wave. She reached for his hand. Eli, I needed a son. You needed a home. That's what family is. For the first time in a long time, his eyes softened. The storm outside calmed slightly, thunder fading into distance. But deep inside, another kind of storm still raged, the one that whispered he'd never truly belong no matter what she said. And as Ruth cleared the dishes later that night, she didn't see the single tear that slipped down his cheek before he turned away. The rain hadn't stopped for 3 days. It hammered the roof, whispered against the windows and filled the house with an unshakable chill. Ruth sat by the living room lamp, knitting quietly, while David checked the locks on the doors for the third time that night. Eli hadn't come home. Every time headlights passed by outside, Ruth's heart jumped. But it was always someone else's car, someone else's son returning home, never hers. At midnight, she finally heard the front door creak open. Eli stepped in, drenched, eyes hollow, clothes clinging to his skin like guilt itself. "Eli," Ruth gasped, standing up. "Where have you been? We've been worried sick." He didn't answer. He dropped his soaked jacket on the floor and stared at them both. Something was unsettling in his silence, something final. David approached him carefully. "Talk to us, son. Whatever's going on, we can fix it together." Eli's lip trembled. His voice broke. "You can't fix me, Dad. You never could." "That's not true." "It is," he shouted. "You think love makes people good? You think kindness can erase where I came from?" The lightning flashed, illuminating his face, his tears, his shaking hands. Ruth reached for him. "We never cared where you came from, Eli. Only where you were going." He laughed bitterly. "Then why does it feel like everywhere I go, I'm still that kid who doesn't belong anywhere?" The sound of thunder swallowed the words. For a moment no one spoke. The only sound was the rain, beating like a pulse against the house. David stepped forward again, not as a father, not as a savior, but as a man who refused to give up on someone he loved. "If you want to leave, I won't stop you. But if you're staying, then stay as our son. Not as a stranger waiting for a reason to run." Eli's breathing grew heavy. He looked between them, two faces that had given him everything, and yet, somehow, he still felt empty inside. He whispered, "I don't deserve you." "You don't have to deserve love," Ruth said softly. "You just have to accept it." And then he broke. The tears came, heavy and raw, washing away the anger that had hardened his heart for years. He fell to his knees. Ruth rushed forward, wrapping her arms around him, holding him as if she could keep the darkness from swallowing him whole. For the first time since he was a child, Eli didn't pull away. David stood there, silent, trembling, watching the two people he loved most finally reach the moment he prayed for. But outside, the rain still fell. And in that endless rhythm, something darker still lingered, a quiet sense that fate wasn't done with them yet. The next morning, the storm was gone. Sunlight bled through the curtains, soft and golden, the kind of light that made everything look like a second chance. Eli sat on the porch, staring at the wet earth. His mind was quiet for once. Too quiet. Ruth came out with a cup of tea. "It's warm," she said gently, handing it to him. He nodded. "Thanks." For a moment, they sat in silence, two souls trying to find a way back to each other. Then Ruth said softly, "You don't have to carry it alone, Eli. Whatever happened before us, it's over now." He looked at her, truly looked at her. There were lines around her eyes he hadn't noticed before, the kind that come from years of smiling and worrying at the same time. "You still believe that?" he asked. "That love can heal everything?" "Not everything," she admitted, "but it's the only thing that ever tries." He smiled faintly, but it didn't reach his eyes. Later that day, David called him to the workshop behind the house. It was the same place they used to fix old radios together when Eli was younger. The air smelled of sawdust and memories. "I've been thinking," David began, "about setting up that car repair shop we talked about. You've got the skill and I've got the tools. Maybe we start fresh. Together." Eli hesitated. The offer felt like sunlight reaching for a man already standing in shadow. "You still trust me? After everything?" "You're my son," David said. "That's all that matters." The words hit deeper than David knew. Because in Eli's heart, guilt had already built a home. That night, as everyone slept, Eli sat awake in the dark. On the table beside him lay a small duffel bag, stuffed with money he'd stolen days earlier from the gas station. He had planned to run away before the storm. But now, he didn't know who he was anymore. He picked up the bag, padded through the hallway, and stopped outside David and Ruth's room. He could hear their gentle breathing inside. A flash of memories, laughter, dinners, warmth, forgiveness. And yet, his mind whispered, "You don't belong here." He turned toward the door. The handle was cold in his hand. A car drove by outside, its headlights cutting through the window and illuminating his face, torn between love and the life he thought he deserved. He whispered, "I'm sorry." He dropped the bag to the floor and stepped outside, vanishing into the silence of the night. The next morning, when Ruth woke up, she found the money sitting on the porch with a note that read, "Thank you for loving me even when I couldn't love myself." She pressed the note to her chest and wept. David placed a hand on her shoulder. He's gone, but maybe this time, he's finding his way. The camera pans up, over the quiet house, the rising sun, and a lonely road stretching far beyond. And somewhere on that road, a young man walks alone, not running anymore, not hiding, just walking toward something new. The story didn't end in blood. It ended in forgiveness. Because sometimes the most powerful redemption isn't found in returning home. It's found in learning why you left. 10 years later, the same quiet town. The same little house at the edge of the hill. Older now, its paint faded, its garden a little overgrown but still alive. A car pulls up by the gate. Dust swirls in the air. A man steps out. He's taller, broader, but his eyes, those familiar storm-gray eyes, still hold the same sadness and strength. What? He walks slowly toward the porch. Every step feels heavier than the last. The wooden boards creak beneath his boots, echoing like whispers from a past he thought he'd buried. He knocks. The door opens. Ruth stands there, older, softer, her hair now streaked with silver. For a heartbeat, she doesn't recognize him. Then her eyes widen. The teacup in her hand trembles. Eli? He nods, his voice breaking. It's me, Mom. The word Mom, the one he had refused to say for years, shatters her completely. Tears spill down her cheeks as she throws her arms around him. Behind her, David appears, slower now, leaning on a cane. He watches in silence, his lips trembling with a quiet smile. Eli kneels before him. I don't deserve your forgiveness. David places a shaking hand on his shoulder. Forgiveness isn't earned, son. It's given. For a long time, they just stay there. The three of them, surrounded by the sound of the wind, the smell of home, and the weight of 1,000 unspoken words, finally at peace. Later, as the sun sets, Eli helps David fix the old radio in the workshop, the same one they once built together. Static hums softly from its speakers until a faint melody begins to play. Ruth watches from the doorway, smiling through tears. Eli looks at them, the parents who chose love when he gave them every reason not to. And for the first time in his life, he feels it, belonging. I used to think love made you weak, he says quietly. But it's the only thing that ever made me strong. David chuckles. Took you long enough to figure that out. They laugh, softly, together, the way families do when the past no longer hurts. As the camera pulls away, the house glows warm against the twilight. The faint tune from the radio grows louder, blending with the sound of crickets and the soft wind in the trees. I know you enjoyed the video, so please subscribe, share, and turn on your notifications.